is now time for the Robesonian Sports Report with Chris Styles on 97.1 FM, 1340 AM, WAGR in Lumberton, covering sports for Robeson County. Now here's your host, Chris Styles.
And a good Thursday morning to you here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR. I'm your host, Chris Styles, sports editor at the Robesonian. And as we do each week, going to take a quick glance at the last week in high school and college football here in Robeson County. And this week, this one's a little different, though, because it's game day in Robeson County as well. A lot of weather coming in tomorrow, chance of rain tomorrow night, so everybody moving their high school football games up to this evening. So tonight it will be Red Springs and Lumberton in Red Springs at 7 p.m. St. Paul's is at West Columbus at 7:30. Southern Lee is at Fairmont at 7 p.m. And we'll get to those in the last segment of the show as we do each week. But we're going to start with a look back at this past week's football as we do to start each show. And those scores and matchups, Purnell Sweat beat Red Springs 21-7 last Friday. Lumberton beat Clinton 41-0. St. Paul's beat South Brunswick 48-23. Westover beat Fairmont 50-20. And collegiately Fayetteville State beat UNCP 35-31. Purnell Sweat and Red Springs, it was a early 14-0 lead for Purnell Sweat, taking advantage of a couple of Red Springs turnovers. And then the last three and a half quarters really played out a lot more evenly. The rest of the game, largely a defensive battle. And Purnell Sweat maintained that 14-point lead the rest of the way. Freshman Richard Lyon came up from the JV team, filling in for some injuries for the Rams, and had a strong game running the ball. He scored Purnell's first touchdown of the game and led them with 67 rushing yards, so a real breakout game for him. But at the same time, Red Springs held the Purnell Sweat rushing attack to 97 yards on the ground, which for the Red Springs run defense that struggled over the first couple of weeks, that was a vast improvement. Jakelson Mack led Red Springs with 87 rushing yards. Probably not quite the offensive showing that Red Springs was hoping for, but did do some good things in that game. Stayed in the game, but ultimately the 21-7 loss. It's the second straight win for Purnell Sweat after it lost its opener to St. Paul's a couple of weeks ago. Red Springs is 0-3 on the season, but every team they've played is from the United 8 Conference, a 3A or a 4A team against the 2A Red Devils. Purnell Sweat has a bye this week. Red Springs, as I mentioned, is home tonight against Lumberton, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Tim Ray will also join us here in just a bit, the Red Springs head football coach. Lumberton beat Clinton 41-0, a thorough and steady domination by Lumberton over a program that is factually the reigning 2A East Regional champions, although they are now 0-3 this season and have yet to score. A vastly different Clinton football team this year. Lumberton with its first 2-0 start in 10 years since 2014, and through those two games they have outscored the opposition 76-0. Lonnie Porter threw for 3 touchdowns for the Pirates, 2 of them to Destin Locklear, 1 to Cameron Flemister. And that is an interesting departure from week 1 in that they did not complete a pass and then week 1 went over Fairmont. So run heavy that game and threw the ball more effectively in the Clinton game. The potential for a balanced offensive attack for Lumberton certainly is there as they continue through the season. Pirates have now won 4 out of their last 5 games, actually, dating back to last year. They had lost, I don't remember the exact number, but it was over a season's worth of games in a row leading into that. Got rid of that streak with a win over Douglas Byrd last year, beat Purnell Sweat to end the season, and now they have won their first 2 games of 2024. And in doing so, they've matched their win total from all of last season. In fact, 2 wins matches their most in a season since they won 4 games back in 2016. Obviously, it's been a struggle for quite a few years for the Pirates, but head coach Torius Baker in his first year engineering a bit of a turnaround, at least so far, for Lumberton. As I mentioned, they're at Red Springs tonight, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. St. Paul's earned a 48-23 win over South Brunswick on Friday night. It was a big game for the St. Paul's offense, 258 rushing yards and 3 very lengthy touchdown runs for Joshua McBride. Theophilus Setzer threw for 215 yards and 3 scores. Good night for receivers Ja'Kai Purcell and Malachi Locklear as well. St. Paul's led this game 28-0 at the half, behind a strong defensive performance in the first half, as well as some of those explosive offensive plays that I mentioned. Coach Mike Setzer was concerned a little bit about they didn't play as well of a third quarter with that big lead, and that's kind of something they've consistently struggled with coming out of the locker room through 3 games this season, even as they've won 2 of those 3 games. So that's something to look for St. Paul's moving forward. Bulldogs are at West Columbus tonight. Here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR, I'm your host, Chris Stiles, sports editor at the Robesonian, and we're going over last week's football results locally. Westover earned a 50-20 win over Fairmont. The Wolverines led 28-0 in this game, although they only outscored Fairmont 22-20 the rest of the way, but had that big lead at that point. 20 points was a season high for Fairmont, but 50 points is also the most they've allowed this season. As some growing pains continue for the Golden Tornadoes. Jamarion Brown did have a touchdown pass to Jameer Jones. Josh Townsend ran for 1, and Jalen Falk had a fumble recovery touchdown on the final play of the game. Fairmont has lost 4 straight games now, and 11 of its last 12 dating back to last year. They're 0-3 this season as they host Southern Lee tonight. Collegiately, Fayetteville State and UNCP in the Two Rivers Classic. This was the season opener for Fayetteville State. UNCP playing its second game of the season. It was a close game back and forth throughout. I think a much higher scoring game than anyone really would have expected. Their games have tended to be close and low scoring, both FSU, UNCP, as well as FSU against Mark Hall, dating back to his time at Chowan. Trey Robinson actually started at quarterback for UNCP as Colin Johnson had an ankle injury and was unable to start. Robinson had a good game, went 13 for 24 for 134 yards, 2 scores. Fayetteville State had taken a 28-24 lead, and UNCP was driving when Robinson had to come out of the game with an injury, and Colin Johnson popped up in the huddle and played quarterback the rest of the way. That happened about midway through the fourth quarter, and actually continued that UNCP drive. They went down the field and scored on a Jaden Smith touchdown reception to take a 31-28 lead with less than 2 minutes left. But Fayetteville State answered, went down and scored on its own touchdown with an 11-yard Damari Daniels run with 17 seconds left to go up 35-31 and held on for the win as UNCP tried to score in that short ensuing drive. UNCP's 0-2 to start the season. They were better offensively in this game than in week 1. Defense probably has some drives that it wishes it could have back, but nonetheless has had a decent start as well. And while the Braves are 0-2, they've played a couple of their tougher opponents right out of the gate. And really all their goals are still ahead of them as they get set to begin conference play. They're on a bye this week before starting Mountain East Conference play next week. Of course, you can read about all that in the print edition of the Robesonian as well as at robesonian.com. Coming up, we've got Red Springs head football coach Tim Ray joining us over the phone. After this, you're listening to the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR. Back on the Robesonian Sports Report, and we're joined over the phone by Red Springs head football coach Tim Ray. How's it going, Coach?
It's going good. How's it going, Chris?
Pretty good. And a little bit of a unique show for us in that we're not usually on a game day morning, being a Thursday show, but in this case we are with the weather moving in and the games being moved. So what's kind of the game day routine like for you, if you will, and how eager are you on game day to just make it to 7 o'clock?
Yeah, especially home games, man, it feels like you get a little anxious. So I have weightlifting, so I have a lot of my players in class, so we do a lot of things, prepare for the game throughout the school day, kind of get them focused, take some ice baths, whatever we need to do during those class periods. But once the bell rings at 3 o'clock, that 3 to 7 period, it kind of comes quick, but like you're waiting around trying to get ready for it, So, but yeah, man, we ready for tonight.
And you guys have Lumberton tonight. They enter at 2-0, which is a different situation than what they've been in recent years. What have you seen on film differently from the Pirates this year as compared to recent years?
Honestly, just looking at what they were building last year, even though it's a new staff, I'm not surprised by the way some of these guys have gotten better from last year to this year. They had some sophomores and juniors that are juniors and seniors this year. Then, they got a few more guys that's on the field that wasn't on the field last year. Then they got some really good young kids. They got some good freshmen and sophomores that are producing on varsity. So I don't think anyone that actually know about the program and know what they have in that school building is surprised by 2-0. They're 2-0 for a reason. Like I said, they're playing good football and they're coached well. So I don't think I'm surprised by their results right now.
Both Josh Deese at Purnell Sweat last week, Torius Baker at Lumberton this week, talking to me about you guys, said one of the first things they said, both of them, was they've got a couple big weapons offensively, referring to TJ Ellerby and Jakelson Mack. So what do those guys bring to the table for you guys?
Those guys specifically are really good ball players. And, that's something that I have watched them develop their junior and senior. I watched them develop since they were freshmen in 8th grade over the years, and I think they really took the love for football now and they took the coaching. And, I think some of the results are following. So, yeah, like I said, they naturally have really good talent. And I think they've been getting coached up well. Like I said, so we look forward to having those guys produce for us. And we're honestly blessed to have two of them like those two, men, because, you don't really have too many teams at 2A that have good weapons like those two.
And Lumberton has not allowed a point just yet this season through their first 2 games. So what will be the challenge of facing the Pirates' defense for you guys?
Well, we've battled some injuries from last week, so, we got a few guys that's still questionable and of how much they're going to be able to go. But I think as far as offensively, we have a good system that can plug and play, if you say, you know what I mean? So I think offensively we have some depth at receiver and running back, and we also have, a pretty decent sophomore quarterback that back up Chase. So I think in all those weapons we can plug and play. The production might not be as high as the number ones, but our number twos aren't far off. So I think the biggest thing we got to do is just stay within ourselves and run the system the way it's coached. I think we'll be able to be there to put some points on the board.
Here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR, I'm your host, Chris Stiles, and we're talking with Red Springs football coach Tim Ray. And you guys struggled a little bit against the run the first couple of weeks, but held Purnell Sweat to 97 rushing yards last week. So how much can you build on that as you face another good running team in Lumberton tonight?
Like I've been telling you since the summer, Chris, we're just not a team that cannot get better each day, each week. And that's something that I wholeheartedly believe we did last week. We did get better defensively. We have to get out of our own way as far as penalties and turnovers. I'm interested to see what our team can look like when we get out of our own way when it comes to those two things. Stop turning the ball over and stop getting the silly penalties. It's rough in this area with officiating. We got some really good officials that's been doing it for a while. Like I told them last Friday, I said, sometimes y'all too good at your jobs, but y'all see a little bit of everything. So, but like I said, I think if we get out of our own way as far as turnovers and penalties and with the offensive production we have and when the defense is trending upward, I'm interested to see how things go tonight.
And it was a 21-7 loss to Purnell Sweat last week, but they scored a couple early touchdowns resulting from Red Springs turnovers. After that, the last three and a half quarters, it was pretty evenly played the rest of the way. So what do you take from that outcome as you're looking ahead to the rest of the season?
Like I said, we take away the first 4 minutes of the game, we played really good football. Even with the 2 touchdowns we gave up early, we had 2 touchdowns called back because of penalties. So like I said, they scored 2 touchdowns early, get the ball inside of the 40-yard line because of turnovers, and then we had 2 touchdowns called back because of penalties. Like I said, we get out of our own way. That's a 28-point swing that could happen. You know what I mean? So those are things that we have to get better at, and things that we have to focus on in practice to continue to coach up well.
Lumberton and Red Springs tonight. Last year was the first meeting all time, surprisingly, between the two schools in football. It was a 1918 win for Red Springs. On the field, off the field, there was the unfortunate incident of shots fired in the parking lot and the game having to be postponed today, the second half of the game. So what do you remember about that night and kind of the chaos of that situation and then the aftermath?
Like I said, I hate that this situation happened because it was a really good ball game.
Yeah.
And it was a Saturday game. The second half was a really, really competitive ball game. And I wish that our fans and the community could have enjoyed it. I hope tonight we can have a good competitive ball game, again, clean ball game. Like I said, Coach Baker, I've known him for a little while now, and I look forward to continuing and coaching against him. And Josh Sheridan as well, the offensive coordinator over there at Wilmington. That's the thing about being in this community. Most of these coaches at the schools, either they were coaches when we were growing up in Robeson County, or we grew up with them in Robeson County.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of familiarity between the schools in the county, and the coaches, as well as the players. A lot of these players probably went to middle school together. Somebody might have moved. They probably played, youth baseball together, whatever. So a lot of these kids have relationships. Like I said, a lot of the coaches have relationships. So that makes it fun to compete against, guys you have a personal relationship with. Like I said, hopefully we get a good turnout tonight from both communities, and we can play a good, clean ball game that everybody can enjoy.
And you're in your third season coaching at your alma mater. How has the reality of doing so kind of compared to what your expectations may have been before you took the job?
Well, when I took the job, we were just in a whole different space where we were 0-3 then as well at this point of the season. But I think this is a completely different 0-3 in my opinion than when we were those years. Right now, competition level is also a big factor, which is an excuse, but it's a big factor. Right now we played every opponent that we played so far has been in the 8 conference. Who I think the high school team put out a 910 ranking, like area ranking, and the number 1 and number 2 team comes from the United 8, which is 71st and Cape Fear. So that just goes to show how strong that conference is. And like I said, every opponent all the way up to this week 4, is in that conference. So I think we're just preparing ourselves, for what's to come. I just think 2A football, especially 2A East, is very strong. And if you're not, I think if we'd have gave ourselves a false sense of hope by playing lesser competition, that wouldn't have been beneficial than, playing some stiffer competition and really preparing ourselves early on in the season for what's to come.
Red Springs football coach Tim Ray, thanks for joining us here on the Robesonian Sports Report.
So, thank you.
And we'll be right back after this. Back on the Robesonian Sports Report, and looking, as we do in the last segment each week, at this week's football games. In this case, it's tonight's football games in high school football locally. Lumberton's at Red Springs, St. Paul's is at West Columbus, Southern Lee is at Fairmont. Purnell Sweat has a bye this week, as does UNCP. Lumberton is going to Red Springs, as I mentioned, tonight at 7 p.m. It's the second meeting all time. And the first time Lumberton has visited Red Springs. And this is football we're talking about. They've played, of course, in other sports, but last year Red Springs won 19-18, as we were discussing with Coach Ray. And Lumberton scored a late touchdown in that game, trailing by 7, decided to go for 2, and the Red Springs defense got the stop on that conversion attempt. Quite a dramatic finish, and as we were talking about earlier, there was no one in the stands to see it after what had happened the night before, unfortunately. But I mentioned earlier, Lumberton's won 4 of its last 5 games, including a 2-0 start, its first in 10 years. And the Pirates were kind of one-dimensional offensively against Fairmont with a run game, didn't complete a pass, but had a few key passing plays against Clinton last week. So developing more of a balanced offensive attack, even as they're focusing on running the ball. Torius Baker, the head coach, has been clear about that, but obviously got to be able to throw the ball as well to have that be an option and have the defense not have to stop just one thing. So they did a better job of that against Clinton, and the result was a 41-0 win. So they go into Red Springs with that as a factor. Red Springs playing its 4th straight United 8 conference team, as Coach Ray mentioned. They lost to Purnell Sweat 21-7 on Friday. And a big question for Red Springs after the run defense improved from week 2 to week 3. Can they continue that improvement as they face Lumberton here tonight in Red Springs? So you have to figure that the Lumberton streak of not giving up a point so far this season is probably going to end tonight. I don't think Red Springs is going to be shut out by Lumberton. But how effective can the Red Springs offense be against that Lumberton defense that, as I mentioned, has put up 2 zeros so far? That's one of the questions to answer, certainly in this game. And we'll have to see. I think it should be a competitive game. And you can see my prediction at Robesonian.com in my picks column published this morning. St. Paul's is at West Columbus. The Bulldogs enter at 2-1. West Columbus is 1-1 on the season. That's a 7:30 game tonight in Cerro Gordo. West Columbus reached the regional final of the state playoffs in 1A last year. One of their 2 losses on the season was that regional final to Tarboro. The other loss was St. Paul's in week 4 last year, a 14-12 decision. West Columbus did graduate several key members of that team, so it's a little bit of a different Vikings team this year. They did beat West Bladen 42-8 last week. St. Paul's coming off a 48-23 win over South Brunswick. And after the strong offensive showing that they had last week, they're going to look to continue that momentum on the offensive end, which is kind of night and day from where they were a year ago. They were struggling to be consistent offensively at this point last year when they played West Columbus. It's only scored 14 points in that game, but it was enough to win. Now they're coming off that big offensive showing against South Brunswick last week. So a series note here, the Bulldogs lead the all-time series 17-4. Most of that was when these teams were conference opponents and met annually from 2003 to 2019. And last year, of course, St. Paul's, as the series resumed, got the win. Here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR, I'm your host, Chris Stiles, sports editor at the Robesonian. Quickly going over this week's high school football games, tonight's high school football games in this case. And Southern Lee is at Fairmont at 7 p.m. tonight at Hallows Floyd Stadium. Southern Lee comes off a 22-0 shutout loss against Eastern Randolph, who is one of the better 1A programs in the central part of the state. It's a run-heavy Cavaliers team with Robert Sims and Johnny Jones, each their leading threats. Fairmont's offensive output has actually gradually improved each game, even as they're 0-3. But how will they do against the Cavaliers is tonight's key question. Fairmont also, as it happens, has allowed more points successively in each game, so not showing quite as much improvement on the defensive end, and it is, of course, a young Golden Tornadoes team kind of going through some growing pains this year. Southern Lee enters at 1-1 as this game takes place tonight. Southern Lee won last year in this series 38-12, won 2 years ago 41-22. Those are the only 2 previous meetings between the schools on the football gridiron. You can read about all these games, a preview for all these games at Robesonian.com and in the most recent print edition of the Robesonian. Also mentioned my picks column was published this morning. And then, of course, we'll have coverage tonight as the high school football games take place locally. Other fall sports in season as well. I've had some volleyball coverage this week, so check that out as well. Thanks to Tim Ray for joining us, the Red Springs head football coach, as they get set to play Lumberton tonight. Thanks to Paul Matthews behind the scenes, and thanks to you for joining us as well here on the Robesonian Sports Report. I'm Chris Stiles. Have a great Thursday.